Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to my Hoot Crew. Hope you're all having a wonderful day. Today we will be doing day 12 and 13 of the Advent calendars. And for the cheese, I got a Swiss and I got an original. And it says make a baby bell using snow. So if you do actually get snow where you are and you want to go outside, if you can make a little baby bell that looks like this out of snow, send it to me on my Instagram or my Twitter, which is in the link in the description down below. You can send me a picture of that. Or the 13th says, before eating your baby bell, do something nice for someone. Well, I think that no matter what, you should do something nice for someone, whether you have a baby bell or not. So hopefully you can do that. But please be kind to one another, okay, guys? So for the tea, we have, my son's put them over here. Let's see. So for the 12th, we have, this one is called Let It Snow. Now, when I looked at this one, I looked at it beforehand, and it had little snowflakes. I think they're white chocolate. So, definitely one that I want to check out. So here we go. Oh, that has like a minty kind of apple cider. Yeah, it has like an apple cidery taste with a touch of orange and mint in it, which is really, really nice. There's definitely apple in that, so I really like that one. All right, so for the 13th, we have organic super ginger. Now, I'm not a huge fan of ginger, so I don't know how this is going to taste, but it smells pretty good. I mean, it's kind of an orangey tea. I'm not really getting any hints of anything but ginger. It's a very dry tea. Not a lot of flavor to it. Yeah, there's not a lot of flavor to this tea, but it has a lot of dryness to it, very earthy. And if it's organic, it's obviously, well, not obviously, but most times it's good for you. So definitely check this out. And if you guys want to try these teas, you can go to davidstea.com. No, they are not a sponsor, but I do highly recommend it. They're all loose leaf teas. There are organic, non-organic. If there is soy in it, there is a warning on the label for anything like that. I'm sure they have a ton of them. They're all loose leaf teas, and they also sell teapots and your special strainers for the loose leaf tea. They sell spoons, cups, everything, travel mugs. So check them out at davidstea.com and order your stuff if you want to. It's not all that bad, but I'm not going to be ordering it again. So let's get to the point of the video. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing today in today's video, I hope you're all having a wonderful day still, and if you stuck around, thank you so much for sticking around past the Advent calendars. Now, I know I haven't read this in a while, but I'm going to read the second half of chapter 1. I'm going to try and make sure to read this at least once a week and get a video of this out. But we were reading The Atheist Who Wasn't, or The Atheist Who Didn't Exist, or The Dreadful Consequences of Bad Arguments. So the second half of chapter 1, if you haven't seen the first part, make sure you go check out my playlists, and I have a playlist of this, so you can go watch the first one, and then come back and watch this one, if you want. Okay, so, the Atheist Bust advertisement illustrates the danger not just of poor arguments, but especially of arguments by soundbite. It's easy to sloganize lazily to try to reduce complex arguments to something that fits on the side of a bus or sounds good on Twitter. But in so doing, you usually lose nuance and depth. In fact, it's worse than that. The temptation to sloganize can result in arguments that are not merely wrong but are utterly bizarre and have some terrible consequences when you turn them around. Let me further illustrate what I mean with an example from one of the New Atheism's founding fathers, Richard Dawkins. His publishing success has helped make atheism hip and cool again, but while he has done terrifically well in print, his other cultural forays have not always been entirely successful. And please forgive me, I do stutter a little, so I will do my best. For instance, his attempt at a movie, The Unbelievers, bombed at the box office, while his faux pas on social media have become somewhat legendary. The danger of being a celebrity is that fame can lure you into believing that every fluttering thought should be served up raw to the masses. It's awfully easy, for example, to tap out something like this quickly on one's smartphone. Stalin, Hitler, and Saddam Hussein were evil, murdering dictators. All had mustaches, therefore mustaches are evil. Okay, so that was a Twitter. I can imagine your reaction on reading that is to think, huh? Sans context? It does look a little baffling. Alas, I am not entirely sure that adding context helps, but here goes. What Dawkins was trying to do via this tweet was to respond to his critics who have said that it's a little troubling to try and label religion as the root of all evil. Given the many atheist mass murderers who litter the historical record, if you're trying to advance the claim that religion is bad and atheism is good, the likes of Saddam Hussein, Joseph Stalin, Pol Pot, and Mao Zedong are somewhat troubling slugs on the otherwise pristine lettuce of atheism. It's one thing to point out the evils of religion, the Crusades and the Spanish Inquisition being among the favorite whipping boys. But what about atheism's own checkered history? Stalin was responsible for the deaths of some 20 million people, while the death toll for Mao's regime is at least double that. These were avowed atheists. So what is the zealous young secularist to do? Enter Richard Dawkins' tweet. One that he probably thought a brilliant rhetorical move. Sure, all of those mass-murdering psychopaths' deposits were atheists, but that's got nothing to do with their villainous, genocidal tendencies. Yes, they had atheism in common, but they also had mustaches in common. Perhaps it was their facial hair, not their secular air, that led to their causing the deaths of tens of millions of people. Does that work? In a word, no. Listen to me very carefully here. I have no intention, none whatsoever, of laying the blame for what these men and all others like them did at the feet of my atheist friends. But my point is this. We can read the writings of brutal tyrants such as these and discover what they themselves said about their motivations. For example, Stalin once said, "You know they're fooling us. There is no God. All this talk about God is sheer nonsense." But Stalin was not content with mere words. He also acted on them. In 1925, he actively encouraged the founding of the League of Militant Atheists, which for over 20 years acted out its slogan, "The struggle against religion is a struggle for socialism." It began with popular campaigns in the media and against religion, aiming to persuade citizens that it was irrational and toxic. But soon things became considerably more violent. Churches were closed or destroyed. Often, dynamiting priests were imprisoned, exiled, or executed. On the eve of the Second World War, there were only 6,376 clergy remaining in the Russian Orthodox Church, compared to the pre-revolutionary figure of 66,140. One dreadful day, on 17th February 1938, saw the execution of 55 priests. In 1917, there were 39,530 churches in Russia. By 1940s, only 950 remained functional. Similar stories could be told of Pol Pot or Mao Zedong, or numerous other atheist dictators. When I lived in Europe, I frequently traveled and taught in former communist countries, such as Hungary and Romania, and heard story after story of the violence that had been endemic before the Iron Curtain fell in 1989. One woman in Bucharest told me how she'd missed out on large amounts of education as a child because her parents were religious. They'd been given a stark choice by the communist authorities: give up your faith or give up your child's education. Here's the problem then. For Dawkins attempted to claim that the atheism of Stalin is unimportant. When we look at Stalin's actions, his atheism seems entirely central, quite frankly. When he came to power, Stalin did not ban razor blades and announce a pogrom against barbers. But he did burn churches and synagogues and have thousands of religious leaders arrested, tortured, and executed. Yet if Dawkins is right, we can ignore all of this. We can lay aside what Stalin did and said, ignore Stalin's very own reasons, and instead offer a random explanation of our own making, one that suits our own purposes. Look, Stalin had a mustache. Don't look at his atheism, look at his facial hair. The problem is that, like all terrible arguments, this cuts both ways. Let me illustrate what I mean by considering Dawkins himself. Why do you suppose he wrote his atheist manifesto, The God Delusion? If you read the preface of the book, he claims that it was to advance atheism, to persuade people to abandon religious faith, and to raise atheist pride. But of course, those are his explanations, and, as Dawkins helpfully reminded us with Stalin, you can't simply take a person's own word and assume they are, well, gospel. So, what should we do? Well, perhaps we should, a la Stalin's mustache, settle on something pretty purely at random to explain the God delusion. Perhaps Dawkins' prediction for garishly colored neckties or the fondness of prawn cocktail. However, that would be woefully simplistic. We can be way more scientific than that. Listen to these words from another atheist writer, the philosopher Patricia Churchland. Boiled down to the essentials, a nervous system enables the organism to succeed at 4 things: feeding, fleeing, fighting, and reproducing. Truth, whatever that is, definitely takes the hindmost. In this astonishingly bleak passage, Churchland is trying to argue that human beings are just like any other animal, driven by our basest, most primal instincts to feed, fight, flee, or reproduce. Our cherished belief that we are concerned with truth or meaning is just an illusion. A trick played on us by our DNA in order to get us to cooperate. Impressed? You should be. After all, this is science. Well, it isn't. Actually, it isn't. It's philosophy. Wearing a false nose and rubber ears and masquerading as science. But nevertheless, let's apply Churchland's 4 options to the vexed question of why Dawkins wrote The God Delusion. Perchance he wrote it for the reasons of feeding. After all, the book has presumably funded numerous hearty dinners at places like G's in Oxford, and indeed the sales figures that Dawkins wouldn't be found shopping for groceries at Lidl for some time to come. Alternately, perhaps the book was written for purposes of fleeing. Should Dawkins be startled by a bunch of militant Mennonites in a darkened Oxford alley? He can fling at them, yell Permian extinction, and while they're thumbing through the extensive index, he will have time to scarper. The third of Churchland's opinion options, fighting, is a little harder to see, but it occurs to me that the God Delusion is a brick of a book, so one might certainly wield the hardback edition quite usefully in a pub brawl. And finally, what about reproducing? Well, one can easily imagine how. I'm a famous author, don't you know? Could open many a hotel room door at the kind of secular conferences frequented by pretty young skeptics. In short, we can ignore every single one of Dawkins' protestations that he wrote the God Delusion to advance atheism and come up with our own reasons. What goes for Stalin goes for Dawkins. Mustache, one might very well say. You will be very relieved to learn that all of the above is in jest. But there is a serious point, a very serious point, and it's this. The thing about bad arguments, about sound bites with substance, is that they're extremely vulnerable to satire. They may sound clever, bright, and shiny when you first hear them, especially if they are accompanied by an Oxford accent or the jangle of PhDs and titles. But stick a pin in them and they deflate quite rapidly. So how can we learn to spot the arguments that are good ones, which are not? One of the tests is to see what happened when one transfers an argument to a different setting. This is what we have just demonstrated with the "there's probably no God, now stop worrying and enjoy your life," and mustaches are more dangerous than atheism. When one pokes at them a bit, and especially when one tries applying them to something else, one quickly sees the flaws. They are both examples of not just weak arguments, but extremely bad arguments. Arguments so terrible, in fact, that you wonder what possessed people to place them on buses, reproduce them in print, or tweet them to 1 million hapless followers. When you see such a thing in the media, to hear them on the lips of friends, don't be afraid to ask a few questions. Tug those loose threads to gently expose them for what they are. And one last thought. I come at this discussion as a Christian philosopher, but I have been struck by how many of my atheist friends are deeply embarrassed by those terrible skeptical arguments. I have lost count of how many times I have quoted Richard Dawkins at atheist friends, only to have them roll their eyes, eject steam from both ears, and retort, "Please don't assume we're all like him." Or, I won't wave Fred Phelps at you if you don't pin the new atheists on me. And that's a very fair point, although I do wish a few more of my atheist friends would speak out, so that the media and the Twitter crowd would realize that there are more thoughtful secularists out there. And so the aim of this book is simple: to clear some of the weeds and bad arguments so that a more sensible dialogue can be had. Because here's the thing. The God question is arguably the most important question that anybody can think about. Whether or not God exists is not a mere intellectual curiosity up there with what's the 10th trillionth digit of pi? Or did Newton invent the cat flap? But a question has implications for every area of our lives, not least because it is directly tied to the question of meaning. Is there something is there something we are meant to be? Or is life spent playing computer games and eating pizza as valid as one spent fighting poverty or serving the cause of justice? At the beginning of the God Delusion, Richard Dawkins is very honest about the chief aim of his own book. And this is what he says. If this book works as intended, religious readers who open it will be atheists when they put it down. What presumptuous optimism! Of course, dyed-in-the-wool faith heads are immune to argument. Their resistance built up over years of childhood indoctrination using methods that took centuries to mature. That's a clever paragraph. When you think about it, if you read the Dawkins book and don't become an atheist, it's not the arguments are the suspect at a $50 Rolex from Tooting Market, but because you're an ignorant, brainwashed cretin, your head's so full of woolly thinking that there's no room for fresh wind of reason to waft through. My aims for this book are a little more modest, and I trust a little more optimistic than those of Dawkins. If you come to this book as an atheist, my hopes is simply that you will at least commit to being a thought-through atheist, perhaps a doubter, rather than a skeptic. Somebody who is willing to think deeply and think well. It has been remarked that the difference between a doubter and a skeptic is the doubter is somebody who hopes there might be an answer, a skeptic hopes there isn't. Abandoning bad arguments is a great way to begin. Conversely, if you come to this book as a religious believer, my hope is that it will encourage you not to be afraid of the atheist soundbites that are frequently hurled like brickbats from various directions in our culture. If you can learn to laugh at bad arguments and their flaws, their mutual power evaporates and you can see them for the paper tigers that they are. I also hope that I might encourage you to see past the ranting of the new atheists to recognize that there are thousands of far more open-minded atheists out there. People who are friendly, good-humored, and open to discussion. What the world needs more than ever is a reasonable dialogue between those who believe in God and those who have questions or doubts, however deeply held, not a clash of fundamentalisms. So, wherever you stand as you start this book, atheist or agnostic, seeker or skeptic, doubter or disciple, I hope that we can all agree that when it comes to the big question of life, we need more than sound bites. Let's aim instead for a grown-up, proper conversation about the things that matter the most, and leave the buses to the fundamentalists. Okay, well, I hope you guys are enjoying that so far. Like I said, if you haven't seen the first part of chapter 1, because it was a long chapter, please go back and check it out. I will try and make sure that I read chapter 2 next week, along with the Advent Calendar videos. Please make sure to leave a thumbs up. If you have any questions for me, my Twitter and my Instagram are down below, or you can leave a comment in the chat. Please share it out so everyone gets a chance to see it. And please make sure to subscribe to see more of my content. Guys, thank you so much for watching these videos and always sticking by. God bless. Bye.